Education USA in general. Sorry about that, guys. And we are a educational advising program that is available around the world. We offer free educational advising in the process of applying to accredited U.S. universities and colleges. And our information is up to date, unbiased, and very complete. And it's important, again, to mention that our services are free. So we can guide students in their process of applying to accredited U.S. universities and colleges. We can also support counselors and teachers because they often have to submit documents to support their students as well. So, our services. We divide the application process into 5 steps. The application process begins with researching the student's options as to whether they would like a 2-year institution, a 4-year institution, how to understand requirements, how to understand university student profiles. Then we move to step 2, where we discuss how students can finance their studies, whether they are looking for generous scholarships or perhaps their family can pay for part of it, or they're looking for loans or funding in the region. And step 3 is actually applying to U.S. universities and colleges, which this webinar is part of step 3 because the Common App is a common platform used by many U.S. universities and colleges, and students often have lots of questions. And step 4 would be, we explain how to apply for your visa once you have been admitted to an accredited U.S. university or college. We cannot guarantee that you will be given your student visa, but we explain the steps and the documents that you have to take so that you have the best chance to get that visa. And finally, step 5 is right before you leave, where we have a kind of like a workshop orientation to prepare students for what they should be packing, what documents they should show the immigration officer when they arrive, how to sign up for classes, basically so that they have a successful few months in the United States. And as I mentioned, we also support guidance counselors and teachers because they often have to upload documents for their students as well. So just to go over a few commonly, frequently asked questions. The first one would be if Education USA is a scholarship program. Education USA is not a scholarship program, but rather a educational advising program. We can guide students to funding opportunities or to scholarships, but Education USA itself is not a scholarship program. Another question we commonly get is if there are opportunities to improve your English. If you are a student that is considering an academic degree in the United States, you should already have an intermediate to advanced level of English. However, many universities and colleges also offer intensive English programs where you can go to the university and have the college experience, but instead of taking a math class or biology class, you would take intensive English courses, right? So those courses have their own prices and we can guide you with information about them as well. Another frequently asked question is if we have short-term cultural study abroad programs. And as I mentioned, Education USA focuses on the services provided by US universities and colleges. So we focus on those academic associates, bachelor's, master's, doctorate, intensive English programs. But it's important to mention here when you see the word internship abroad, that if you study in the United States with a student visa, an F1 visa, after you finish your degree, you could apply to legally extend your degree 1 more year with a program that's called OPT, Optional Practical Training, to work for 1 year legally in the United States. And finally, a common question we get is if we have partnerships or a specific list of universities where we are sending all of our students, and the answer is no, because we are a program sponsored by the US government, so we are unbiased. We represent all 4,700 universities and colleges in the United States, and we concentrate on helping the students find the best fit for them. So today we have with us 2 wonderful advisors from our region. We have Jenika Heim, who's from Education USA Canada. She has a Bachelor's of Arts from UC Davis and a Master's of Arts from San Diego State University. And we also have Yandhi Reynoso, who is from Education USA Mexico City, who has both a Bachelor's of Science and a Bachelor's of Fine Arts from Utah Valley University. So before we give them the microphone and the chance to give you all of their information, we're gonna do a quick poll. So on your screen, you should see right now 3 questions in front of you. Please answer them. The first question is, where are you joining us from? We'd like to know if our guests are from Canada or Mexico or Panama or different places around the world. How far are you on your Common App? So have you not started, or you're pretty much finished, but you want a little bit of help? And which part of the Common App is most confusing for you. So is it the profile section, the family section, the education section? So we're gonna wait a few seconds as most of you get connected. And we are aware we also have people watching from Facebook Live. So thanks for being with us. We have representatives waiting. If you have any questions on Facebook, you can type your questions in the comments section on Facebook and we will get to you shortly. Okay, so we're going to take a look at these results. We have the majority of people sharing, joining us from North America, but we also have representation from Central America, South America, and other places around the world, which is exciting. Then many of you have not started the Common App yet, which is okay, but hopefully after today you can get started and work on it because deadlines are approaching. And many of you said that the most confusing part for you of the Common App is the courses and grades section. So just a reminder that if you have any questions for Jenika or Yandhi, please type them to Q&A Jackson Cruz, which is one of the options you can message, and we will be asking those questions at the very end. So without further ado, I would love to introduce my colleagues, Jenika and Yandhi.
Great, thank you, Mo. Perfect. Well, thanks everyone for being here today. This is the agenda. These are the topics that we will be talking about today. All of them, as you know, are related to the Common App. So let's get started. Next slide, please. Great, thank you. So we know that some of you are currently working on your college application and might have a few questions about it, and you might be familiar with this platform already. Please note that the Common App will make your admission process easier. The Common Application or Common App, as you know, is a nonprofit member organization representing nearly 900 diverse institutions of higher education. These institutions will require an application to be admitted. So it allows you to send an application completing a profile and one essay to different schools at the same time. So keep in mind that you will have to pay also a fee for each school application that you send. Next slide, please. This platform, it is great because it will help you to stay organized with deadlines and also know the components of each application. It is a process that will require some time. So we recommend you to get familiar with the platform time in advance. So maybe visit the website, maybe download the app and know the different resources that are available to you before starting with your profile. You can start by creating an account, but keep in mind that August 1st is when the Common App opens. It's when you can start your application if you're going to apply to a university that year. So by now, September 28th, the Common App is already open. Next slide, please. So to create an account, it's really easy. Make sure you use an email address that you check and that it is professional. This is the email that the Common App and colleges will use to get in touch with you. You will need some basic information like your name, your home address, your phone number, and date of birth. Be sure to use your legal name as it appears on official school documents and also on your standardized tests. This will make sure colleges can match documents to the correct person. At the end, so before you finish creating your profile, your account, you will just adjust your communication preferences and accept the Common App privacy policy. Make sure to contact your EducationUSA advisor if you have any questions on how to create your account or an additional help. They are a great resource to you for the Common App. Next slide, please. So now that you have created an account, you can start by doing a college search so that you can narrow down which schools you are going to apply to, and then you will add those to your personal dashboard. Next slide. Thank you. So here in the college search tab, you will search for and add the colleges you want to apply to, as I mentioned. If you have a school in mind, you can search this school by name. If you want to keep exploring, you can use some of the filters like the ones you see on screen. Adding a college, it's super easy. You may add a college using the add button in the search results list, or you can also select a college and then using the add to my colleges button from their info screen. Once you have added colleges, you can see them, on your dashboard in your My Colleges tab. Keep in mind that you may only add up to 20 colleges, so you may adjust your list of colleges at any time as well. Next slide, please. So now, if we go back to the main dashboard, as we can see on screen, we have added a few universities as an example. Next slide. Thanks. Then we can go to My Colleges tab to answer university-specific questions. Remember that the Common App will go to each school that you are going to apply. So this tab will help you to learn their college information, also deadlines. You can actually take a virtual tour, and we also recommend you to visit their website. This is where you will see each component specifically of each university. Next slide. Thanks. In this questions section is where you will also find the supplemental and additional essay questions. Keep in mind that each university will ask you to complete different prompts. If you need additional help on these supplemental essays, make sure again to contact your Education USA advisor. I'm pretty sure that they can give you helpful resources on how to get started with those. Next slide. So moving on to the recommenders and Ferpa section. Every college gets to choose their own recommendation requirements. You can find more details on each colleges on the college information page. To invite and assign recommenders from the My Colleges tab, select a college and open the recommenders and Ferpa sections. If you haven't done so already, you will need to complete the Ferpa release authorization. As we can see on screen, the Ferpa regulates the privacy of student education records, which could include your application to the college where you enroll. Ferpa also gives you the right to review confidential letters of recommendation provided as part of that application after you enroll. Next slide, please. Thanks. In the application, you will be asked if you want to waive the right to review confidential letters of recommendations. Waiving your right lets colleges know that you don't intend to read your recommendations. So some recommenders may decline to write a letter for you if you don't waive your rights. So make sure to check with your counselor or your teacher to see if any of them follow this policy. Most students usually waive their right. Thank you. So now that you have completed the Ferpa release authorization, you can add your recommenders, and we'll see these different invitations as we can see on screen. In the Common App, there are 4 types of recommenders you can invite. Counselors who submit your transcripts and your school report. Also teachers whose letters of recommendation talk to colleges about your academic and also your personal characteristics. So select the type of invitation you would like to send, and make sure that for each invitation, you will need information of your recommenders, like their name, their email addresses, etc. So after you add a recommender, you can review their info using the manage recommenders button as well. So if your high school doesn't have a high school counselor or anyone who can help you with this role, you can contact your Education USA advisor and they might be able to function as one. But having said that, it is important that you establish a relationship with your advisor time in advance, since these type of recommenders will need to write you a letter of recommendation, and they of course they need to know you before. Next slide, please. Let's go back. There. Thank you. The other type of recommenders are other recommenders, as we can see on screen, who share more information about your character and also abilities outside the classroom. Also, advisors are the other type of recommenders. They don't submit any form, but they can track your progress and provide also guidance. So here you can add also your Education USA advisor. In general, each college has their own recommendation requirements. For example, one college may need 2 teacher recommendations, and some colleges may not want any teacher recommendations. That's an example. But colleges can also determine what kinds of recommenders they want. So make sure to learn this information on the college information page. Once you have added these recommenders, you can also see the status of the documents they need to submit. Next slide. So moving on to the Common App tab, here's where you will start filling out your personal information. Make sure you write, as I said before, your legal name as it appears on official government documents, and also your school information. Next slide. These are the other fields that you will need to complete when working on your profile. You will notice that some of the information you provided when creating your account before will be already added. So please keep in mind, that if you need to update some of this information, like your address or any other information, you can do that anytime before submitting your application. Let's talk now about the demographics field. The demographics section, provides the opportunity to share more information about your background. Please note that these questions in this section are not required. However, at the end, you will be asked, as you can see on screen with those lines, you will be asked to check that you have completed this section to your satisfaction. Next slide. And as I mentioned, this section asks students to provide information about their ethnicity and their race. So it might be helpful to first highlight the difference between these two terms, which are often confused. Essentially, ethnicity refers to a cultural group, and race refers to a genetic group. So these terms are not mutually exclusive. For instance, your ethnicity can be Hispanic, Latino, and your race could still be either white or black. So you also have the option of selecting more than one race, if so you identify. As we've mentioned before, all these questions in this section are entirely optional. This information is helpful just for statistics purposes. Next slide. Moving on, let's talk about the citizenship section. Usually include all citizenship statuses. Depending on your answer, you might be asked to provide additional information. For example, next slide. Most of you will be considered as non-US citizens, so it will ask your citizenship and if you hold a valid US visa. You might have a tourist visa, so it will ask to provide the visa number and the date you issue that visa. The last question will be if you intend to apply for a few for a new US visa, and that will be an F1 student visa in most cases. Next slide. So now let's talk about the education section that it's under the Common App tab. In this section, you will share information about your school and your academic history. First, you will need to add your current or most recent high school. If you don't see your school listed here, that's pretty common for a lot of students that are watching. You can select the option that says my school's not listed. And then you will be able to add your school information. Next slide. If you attended more than one high school, you will need also to add those schools as well. Make sure to add the school name and share the dates you attended. You will also be asked to share why you left that school. Next slide. If you have ever attended or have already a college course, you will also be required to report that in the colleges and universities section. It will ask you to add the school name and details like when you took that course exactly. Next slide. Yeah, moving on to the grades section. Here is where you will enter information on your graduating class and your GPA report. Your counselor should be able to help you complete this section. You should report your current class rank in GPA, even though that might change later in the year. Keep in mind that if your high school doesn't rank, that's okay. You can select none. If your school doesn't calculate a cumulative numerical GPA, or if it uses a GPA scale that is different than the options that are available in the drop-down menu, you can just leave the cumulative GPA field blank. This field is not required for submission of your application. You can always use the additional information prompt in the writing section if you would like to elaborate a little bit more. Some applications like the Common App give you the choice between putting a weighted or unweighted GPA on your application. Keep in mind that with an unweighted GPA, the class rank, the class credits are a little bit different. Earning an A in an honors class, for example, counts for the same amount of GPA points as an A in just a regular level course. With a weighted GPA, the A in the honors class will be ranked with slightly higher GPA points for that class. I know it's a little bit confusing if you're not familiar with this. It is optional, but unweighted is the most typical answer. Also, many students leave it blank because it is something that doesn't appear or exist on their transcripts. Also, please be aware that the colleges you are applying to will have access to your full transcripts, as well as the information you enter here. So they will not only see your GPA, but your individual grades and also your grade trend across your school career during high school. So many colleges will actually recalculate your GPA based on their own criteria. Also, the information you enter here may not be evaluated exactly as you might think it will be. This also depends on the college. Next slide. So you will be also asked to list your current year courses. For each course, you will enter the title, the level, and school, and also the schedule system. Next slide. In this section is where you can add any academic achievements. You can list up to 5 honors. So for each honor, you will include your the level you receive, the level of recognition you receive, and also when you receive it. Honors, I think, are a great way of distinguishing yourself from other applicants, especially to those highly competitive schools where most applicants have very high test scores or GPAs. An honor just refers to any award or achievement you receive at any point during your high school. Because you are only limited to 5, you may need to choose the ones that are the most important to you, or those that best represent your academic achievements. If you need more space to list other honors, maybe just include the most impressive and relevant achievements in the honor space. And you can also use the additional information section to discuss maybe other awards, or maybe you can just consider sending a resume as a supplement to your application. List your honors in order of descending importance, with the most selective or competitive, such as if you have any international awards at the top, before state or regional and school awards. Next slide. And in this section, you will answer questions about any community-based organizations which may have helped you with the college application process without charging a fee. This is also where you can include your EducationUSA advisor. Next slide. And now I'll give the time to Jenika.
Thank you so much, Yandhi. And she made it halfway through the Common App, and I'm going to take you through the other half. And hopefully your heads aren't spinning. We'll take questions at the end to try to help clarify anything that we brush over too quickly. So as we move through the Common Application section, you can see we're hitting all of the various tabs, and as we work down, we have testing. This is where you can self-report tests that you've taken. So first and foremost, you don't have to self-report any tests if you don't want to, or if you're not sure whether you plan to take tests. So you can see the wording here. It says, do you wish to self-report scores that you've already had, or future test dates for tests that you plan to take? So right now, with SAT, ACT subject tests being optional for this upcoming year, you can absolutely choose not to report these within the application. But if you choose that you want the schools to have the scores later on, they need an official score report. So you can send in that official score report and it will be added to your application, even if you didn't self-report them. The only real benefit to self-reporting is that some schools will take a self-reported score as part of the application. And then later on, if you get in, will require you to follow up with an official report. So just be aware that if you do self-report a score, you will likely be asked to follow up with an official report. Again, if you're not sure you want to send one in, don't self-report. You can see in this section as well, you will also be able to report IELTS or TOEFL, which are the English language scores. So if your first language is not English, you'll likely take one of these exams. And you can also submit AP or IB scores here. I do suggest you self-report AP or IB scores if you have taken them, and also if you plan to take them. It is a good idea to let the admissions committee know that you are on track to take an AP or IB if that is your course of study. And then in the international applicant section there at the bottom, it does ask you if your particular educational system requires you to have a leaving exam. I can tell the Canadians in the audience that it's not common in Canada to have a leaving exam. And if you're not sure what an exit exam is, just think of it as, if you have a test you have to take in order to graduate and leave school, then that is an exit exam. If you have something like an English proficiency test or like leveling test that you take, that everyone takes just to like get an assessment of your level, that's not an exit exam. So that's just a good way to think of it. And the Duolingo English test doesn't currently have a self-reporting function yet within the Common Application. Hopefully that'll be updated in the future. So as you can see, any test that you do decide to self-report, you can see that they will come up here and they will be particular little drop downs. So if we were to click on, say, the AP subject tests, then within that section, slide, then you can report how many tests that you've taken. So if you're somebody who is planning to take an AP test, for example, you could type in you're taking one. It's going to be in the upcoming year, or in the case here, I put May 2020, so you would have already taken it. And then you use the drop down to pick what subject. And then of course, score is not mandatory, because if it's a test you plan to take, you wouldn't report a score. But if you've already taken it, you can include the score here. I do suggest that if your AP scores don't show up on your transcript, that you should definitely self-report them, just to make it very clear that you've taken them. And you may need to follow up with your guidance counselor or with the college board to send in additional score reports as needed. Next slide. Activities. This is where we're going to spend the bulk of the time. I know a lot of you probably have questions about the activities list. So I want you to think about activities as anything that you do that is not your schoolwork, so sitting in class or doing homework. That's related to school, that's your schoolwork. Everything else is an activity. So you can see some examples here. Arts, music, club, community engagement. Community engagement is pretty broad. That involves like volunteer work or anything that you do within whatever community that you have. Family responsibilities, this is a big one. So if you're not involved, let's say, in many after school clubs because you go home and you babysit a younger sibling for 3 hours each school day, that's an activity. That's something that the admissions committee wants to know about, because then they can understand how you're spending your after school time. You can report structured activities or unstructured activities. So talk about your hobbies, athletics, work, either paid or unpaid. So, and any other experience that could have been meaningful to you. So I think sometimes people think of this section as just extracurriculars that are maybe school sanctioned or clubs, but I want you to think more broadly than that. If you spend 10 hours a week knitting as a hobby, that's actually a significant amount of your time. So you can include that here. There's also a section for religious activities. If you spend an entire day of the week at your local church or mosque or temple, then that's also something that you can include. So the question underneath says, do you have any activities you wish to report? I absolutely hope the answer to this question is yes, and that you have up to 10 that you can report. You don't have to fill out 10 if you don't feel you have 10 to complete, but do really, you're going from all the way grade 9 up through grade 12. This is a long period of time. Reflect back, really think of the things that you've been involved in, and highlight, of course, the ones that are most meaningful to you. Just as Yandhi said about the honors list, you start with the most meaningful or the one that you spend the most time on, and then you work your way down. So let's take a look at the next slide, and you can see what it is you need to enter here. So each activity, they'll come up with just, each one will have a number at the top. So number 1, I've gone ahead and chosen something out of the drop down here. So I chose journalism and publication. And then the position, so you have 50 characters to list your position. List the most kind of senior or the most important position you've had. So if you've done, for example, if you were involved in school council every year, and the last year you were president, you could say school council president. And you can kind of modify that in your characters below in the description if you'd like, but you always want to highlight the most senior role that you've had. And then you give the organization name. So I always suggest that you give the official name of the organization, and then if it's not clear what it is, maybe just a quick description. So in this case, I said The Page, which happened to be the name of my high school's school newspaper, fun fact. So that's not clear what that is if you just left it at The Page, right? So I included The Page school newspaper. If something is in a language that's not English and it's not clear exactly what it is, it can be helpful to have a brief translation next to it, again, just to help the reader understand what kind of organization it is or what it does, but also have the official name so it's easy to look up on a website. If we could go back, please. At the bottom there, you have the description. So I've included a brief description here, and I want you to think about how can this description be improved? So you only get 150 characters. This is a very small number of characters. You will see, this is like original tweets, like shorter than the original tweet. So you have to be very economizing with your words, and you have to really decide what's most important. So take a look at what I wrote here, and you can either put it in the chat if you want or just think about it. I said, I edited and wrote articles for our school's newspaper. Now, is that a really good description? It's a definition of what a school editor does, yes, but we already know from the activity type, the position, the leadership, the organization name, that you are the school editor of the newspaper, and we know school editors edit and write for the newspaper, right? This is actually not a very useful description. Instead, I want you to think about, what did you accomplish that sets you apart from maybe somebody else that was in this role? Did you start a new column? How many people were you in charge of? What was the distribution of the newspaper? So think of statistics, think of numbers, think of things that are quantifiable. If you're doing volunteer work and you've raised money, how much money did you raise? So really think of the things that, that will really make this different than just being a participant and giving a definition, particularly if it's a pretty normal activity. And by normal, I mean one that we would know just by the drop down what it is. All right, next slide, please. Participation grade level. Okay, so most schools in the United States are grade 9 through 12. That's not true everywhere in the world. And so I know that participation grade levels is fallible. Particularly, I have students in Quebec where this doesn't make a whole lot of sense based on their system. So if you're in a country or a province or state where your system doesn't match up to this completely, what you need to do is your best. The admissions officers know that this is not perfect. And what you should do if it's not super clear is you can always put in the additional information section, which I'll show you later, how it is you filled this out, just to give them some tips on how you completed it. So for example, what I say to my students who are in Quebec, who graduate high school at grade 11 and then go into their college years, and that's not called 12 or postgrad, but why not? Let's call the first year 12 and we'll call the second year postgrad. And if you stick to that, then it will make sense for the reviewers. So you can include when you participated, you can include when you participated, whether it's during the school year, during breaks, or all year round. When it comes to hours you spent per week and how many weeks you spent, do your best. Obviously, nobody's spending the exact amount of time each week of the year on certain activities. It usually varies, but just do your best to try to estimate how much time you might be spending. Obviously, if it's a hobby, then you're going to just have to take a, kind of average it out over the span of the year. If you intend, the last question is, I intend to participate in a similar activity in college. This is just to get a sense of how you might throw yourself into your new university community. So it's not expected that you would go down and click yes, 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 yes on everything. Of course, there's going to be things you stop doing at the high school level, and things that you will start doing in university, new things that you'll learn. So that's expected of you. But I'm sure there might be one or two things on your list that you know that you would want to pursue, and you can feel free to let the university know that. Next slide. Writing. This is also a super important section, but we're not going to spend time here today because full webinars, full blogs, full things are done on writing the essay. And I know we have some planned. I'm sure, Mo, you can let us know in the chat if we've got one on the schedule right now about writing your personal essay, or Jackson. So stay tuned for other webinars on this subject matter. We like to spend a full hour to talk about this. But when you go to this writing section, there's a couple things to look at. First and foremost, you will first say that you understand that the universities, that some of them require the essay. And then out of the universities who are on your list, the ones who show up on the left side there will require the essay, and the ones on the right will have it not required. If your institutions don't require the essay, you don't need to submit it, or it's not going to be, necessarily part of the review process. You have 7 essay prompts to choose from, and it's 650 words. And that's all I'm going to say about it as we move on to the next slide. And I'll talk a little bit more about the other things that are in the writing section. This is where you also give your disciplinary history. Okay, so if you've had any disciplinary things that have happened in school, you will need to say yes, and you will need to typically give a little description there. And that's usually something that your guidance counselor should also reflect on in their letter and notes, so that there's a bit of a context, not just from yourself, but from the administrative side of your school. If you have never had a suspension or anything, you simply put no. The next drop down is very important because there's a brand new question here. So in the additional information section, I'm going to read the question because I think it's important that you understand it fully. Community disruptions such as COVID-19 and natural disasters can have deep and long-lasting impacts. If you need it, the space is yours to describe those impacts. Colleges care about the effect on your health and well-being, safety, family circumstances, future plans, and education, including access to reliable technology and quiet study spaces. And then they have a link for more information if you'd like on that. So a lot of our lives were disrupted because of COVID-19 this year. And I'm sure you maybe had some things that changed in your life. This is your opportunity to talk about those changes. And this is specifically for those changes. Okay, so if it's COVID-19 related, or it also says natural disasters. We've had some flooding in Canada. We've had some wildfires as well, just like in the US. And I know we've had hurricanes in the region as well, things like that that may have affected you. And if this is the case for you, then this is the place to share that information. You can, when it talks about health impacts and stuff, just know you're never required to give detailed health information about your family. But what it's asking you is because of COVID-19, did things change for you, or were they worsened in some ways? For example, if you have a family member who's immunocompromised and that changed the way that you were able to engage in school, that's something that you can share here. So this is a very important question for you to consider engaging with. I know a lot of students had things canceled this year, and that would be a place to talk about it, as opposed to kind of sprinkling it throughout your application. The last thing you want to do is have every answer be, well, because of COVID-19, this was canceled, so blah, blah, blah. Or, you don't want to have as much of a, that to kind of slant all of your answers. So this is a good place to put that information. It's only 250 words, so you really need to get right to the point if you're going to talk about this. On the next slide, you'll see that even beyond the COVID-19 question, oh, this is still the COVID-19 question. It shows the 250 words. There we go. Beyond the COVID-19 question, I guess maybe I didn't take a picture of it, there's also something called additional information. You get up to 650 words to provide any additional information you want on anything. If you feel like you didn't cover it yet in your application, you get to cover it. So that's what that's for. And so after you finish everything else you've written, feel free to use that space for whatever you'd like if you need it. Courses and grades. Most people, this was the one that most people wanted to know a lot about. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on courses and grades. Number one, most schools don't require it. There's only about 20 to 25 universities in the US that require you fill it out. If you don't need to fill it out, don't fill it out. The other schools won't look at it. So that's number one. A lot of you probably won't even look at this. If one of your schools is on the list, I know a lot of people apply to Stanford, USC, Arizona State. So there are some, there's some pretty, some schools with a large number of international students and applicants who are on this list. So if you do need to fill out courses and grades, I'm going to go over it very briefly. So next slide, please. You will see these little drop downs where you'll need to click on each one individually to fill out each grade. Next slide. And so, for example, if you were filling out grade 9, this screen kind of pops up. You would include your school name, the year that you're reflecting on, the grading scale that your school has, the schedule that you have. And again, this is going to be as best as you can do. I know COVID's changed things. Here in Canada, some schools have gone to octomesters, which I know are not on the Common Application. So again, if something's not represented, you just do your best, and the transcript is always going to be the most important for any decisions that are being made, as well as the school profile that your counselor submits. Those are the most important pieces. Courses and grades are most likely used for a couple of purposes, maybe for self-reporting purposes for students who have trouble getting a transcript, and for data purposes. So if you're submitting a transcript, that's what they're going to rely on, okay? So then just do your best here. So for example, for the subject matter, if it's, English, you put in the course name or course number. Course level, you do your best. Most are going to be regular. If you know it's an honors class or an AP class or something like that, you can include it. There's a lot of different choices in the drop-down. You work with your EducationUSA advisor if you need more help kind of knowing how to match things. I mostly tell students to just put regular unless they know it's something enriched, and then include your grades. When it comes to something like math, in the US, they have their math like algebras, grade 9, geometries, grade 10, trigonometries, grade 11. So in Canada, we don't do it that way. I'm sure in where you live, you might not do it that way either. So again, you could just click math other if none of these work for you, and then just put in your course name and go from there. I think the other challenge is that if your transcript isn't in English, if you've gotten an English translation, then use the translation to fill in the course names. If you haven't gotten an English translation, then again, just maybe do your best with trying to create the course name here. So that's what courses and grades are. Again, it's not the end of the world if it doesn't match. This wasn't made for the most important thing you need to know here is this was not made for international students. This was made for American students in their curriculum. So it really doesn't represent, the hundreds of other systems that are out there in the world. So don't get too kind of bogged down in this, in the details of this. Okay, and the last thing I want to bring up is, so you can see the point of this slide, I went back to the writing slide. On the upper right-hand corner of every part of the Common Application, there are tutorials in the application, and you can click on that and they have brief videos that walk you through how to do that section of the application. So definitely use that. But if they're using language, like American language that you don't understand because it's not the same words you use where you live, then that's where working directly with your EducationUSA advisor is a great idea, because they can help you with those translations if it's not kind of a one-to-one situation. Next slide. And now Yandhi and I will take your questions. We're so happy. We've got 12 minutes left. I'm sure Jackson and Mo have been receiving an onslaught of questions.
Yes. So I think Jackson and I are gonna go back and forth with our questions.
Right.
Because we have a lot. And feel free, there are certain questions that we might direct just to Jenika or just to Yandhi if there's a regional question. And if not, either one of you can feel free to asking or answering the question. So this one I'm going to gear towards Yandhi because this is asked by someone from Latin America, which is a common question, is if I have two first names, where do I write my second name? And do I need to include both of my last names? Because as we know, a lot of Hispanic and Latin individuals have two last names. So they're wondering how they would include that in the Common App.
Yeah, as I mentioned when I was presenting, make sure that your name matches your school documents. So that would be my suggestion, to add those last names unless you are registering your high school with only one last name, but I will suggest to add those. Also, how it will appear or how it appears in your passport as well.
Okay.
And the other question, what was the other question?
It's the same idea, is if I have a name like Maria Jose, and if I have two last names, where should I put both last names or just one last name? Okay, perfect. So we have a question here for Jenika about, I think you went over this, but for those who are in Quebec and they have CEGEC, I think is the word or the term, they go to one of those schools, how are they supposed to report their last few years of school?
Yeah, so Cégep. And so yeah, that's what I was trying to get at during like the activities section and things like that. So do your best to match things as you can. So if you don't have a traditional 9 through 12 high school with, Jackson, I think there's some motorcycles.
I'm sorry. Yes, I know there's some motorcycle. I'm so sorry.
It's okay. So basically, when it comes to first the education section, you have two choices. You can put both the institutions down as high schools, or you could put your high school down as high school and your Cégep down as college. I've heard of students doing it either way. Whatever way you choose, again, just have a consistency and have a method for how you present it. When it comes to your activities or anything where you need to kind of select grade 9 through 12 or postgrad, you can either use grade 12 for Cégep 1 and postgrad for Cégep 2 and beyond, or you could just use postgrad for anything to do with Cégep. Again, that is up to you. Just report how it is you're filling out the form, and just make sure to really use that additional information section and know that anything grades related, the transcripts are going to be most important, as are the school profile.
Okay, and then I think this would be a good question for Yandhi. For those in Mexico, and I know in Costa Rica it's the same way, in many other Latin American countries where perhaps high school ends in 11th grade. And so when you turn in 4 years of grades, you're actually turning in 1 or 2 years from junior high or middle school. And so the question is if they should only include the name of the high school that they graduated from, or if they should be including the name of the junior high or previous high school as well.
Yeah, you should include, if you're from Mexico, you should include your tercer año de secundaria. So that's your last year before high school. And yes, I think you should include both institutions.
Right. So that is why, for example, the Common App asks for all previous high schools you attended, because they want to see, and they will ask you why. So if it was a natural change in the system, in your high school, in your country system, you can explain, in my country, you change schools at this grade. And they will understand. So I don't know if maybe Jenika wants to do this one. Can you explain what class rank is and how you calculate it?
Sure. Okay, so class rank is something that some schools in the United States use, and a lot of private schools oftentimes use. It's calculated by your school's administration if they have it, and it's reported by them. So most schools in Canada don't have rank. So you just simply don't report it, and guidance counselors say we don't have rank. If that's the case for your school and where you're from, then you do the same thing. And it's actually common in the US. I went to high school, I'm from the US, I went to high school there. We didn't have class rank at our public school either. So don't think that it puts you at a disadvantage. It's just something to report if your school has.
Mm-hmm. And maybe Yandhi could answer this, or Jenika as well. How do I know if my grades are weighted or unweighted?
I think this is something I also mentioned with Jenika. This is something that will appear on your transcripts. So if it doesn't appear on your transcripts, then it doesn't exist and you don't need to report it. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to that, Jenika.
No, I just tell people don't self-report your grades in the education section if it's not relevant to how your grades are reported. Mm-hmm. So if you don't have a GPA, don't create one. It's if you create one, it will be thrown in the garbage bin anyways, because it's a self-report of a just made up GPA is not going to be a trusted way to make a GPA. Just like they don't let you self-transcribe your grades or self-translate a letter of recommendation. You kind of think of it the same way. You're not allowed, you're not the keeper of a GPA. That would be either your guidance counselor, or they'll do it on site if they need one.
Right. So just to back up what Jenika said, because I have a question here about how does GPA work with the IB diploma? Again, if your high school doesn't use GPA, you should not be making that up. You should not be calculating that. You should report your grades exactly as they are given to you in your country's system, and the universities will take a look at them and decide what the GPA is in their terms. We have a question here of when you're reporting your grades in your courses. One student says, my school does not offer AP, IB, or honors. We have one type of curriculum that we follow. So would my courses be considered regular or not applicable?
I would say regular. That sounds regular.
Yes, I would agree.
I think the default's just regular for the most
yes.
part. And I had another student just ask a question privately, but I think it's one I get a lot. So I'm just going to go ahead and give it out loud. Does not having AP at my school set me back? And I think it's important to know that the universities are looking at how you perform within your school. And it's up to your guidance counselor in their school profile to say what's available at your school. And you're never expected to take things that aren't at your school. So if your school doesn't have AP, doesn't have IB, doesn't have honors, you weren't expected to take those classes. They didn't exist for you.
Exactly. Very valid. Another question we have is when listing our awards, do the awards have to be personal awards, or can I list team awards if I was part of that team?
You can add those, just make sure to say that maybe it was a team award, but I think it'll be fine just to still list those.
Okay. And going back to what we just talked about, Jenika, I have a student here who's wondering, for example, in his system, they only give grades from 0 to 100. They do not use a GPA. So he's wondering, is it necessary or recommended that he pays to have an evaluation, for example, from World Education Services to get that calculated GPA in a more official way? Or is it okay if he does not do that?
So basically, the universities, when they receive your application, if they want that, they will require it as part of their application process. A lot of schools in the United States, their admissions office, if they need a GPA, they'll create one themselves. So it really just differs based on the institution. So you need to look up their policies. And if none of the schools you're applying to require you to get a transcription of your grades, then you don't need to do it, an evaluation. You don't need to do it if it's not required. If you want it for your own personal knowledge, I suppose you could do that. If you're a student athlete and you need a GPA for that, then you should be using the NCAA core courses. We're not going to dive deeply into that, but if you have more questions, ask your EducationUSA advisor about how to do that GPA as an athlete.
Okay, this one can be for either one of you. We have a student who is asking, what category would you advise me to put my activity of starting a business? So the student started a business and they're not sure how to categorize that.
Oh, Yandhi, I feel like I got to open up the Common App and start cruising through the...
It's okay. So maybe I'll look for another one while we think about that, because it's a very unique question.
I've had students start a business before, and it really depends on where you're at. So there's a category that's nonprofit. So if you're a nonprofit, then there's that. If you are getting paid for what you're doing already, like if you're in the green, you could call it paid work. So there's a few different options, because there's also categories like environmental or social justice. And if what your business is around one of those topics, then it could be one of those. There's like a lot of different categories that it could be. So
good, wonderful. One section we're getting lots of questions about is what would you include and what would you not include in the additional information portion of the Common App?
I would suggest maybe if there's anything else that, as I mentioned when I was presenting, that you will like to elaborate a little bit more, or that if you don't have enough space, you can add that. I cannot think of an example right now. Yeah, I don't know, Jenika, if you have anything else to mention.
Yeah, I would just say if you feel like there was anything that wasn't clear that you want to make sure you include. I've had students in that section, if they've had personal things happen, but they didn't want to write their personal essay about it, like they wanted to focus their personal essay on something more positive or something that they feel represents them, but they've had something else kind of rough or different or whatever happen in their personal life, but they want the admissions officers to know about that. That's a good spot to put it, because it's like, oh, by the way, I'm also working through these things, or I have this on my plate. I just didn't feel like dedicating my main space in my application to that. So that can be a good thing to put in that space. And again, like your Education USA advisor can help you through that if you're not really sure what to put. I would say it's not a place for like airing a lot of grievances or like kind of going over the, you know, there's maybe some things you don't want to include. Again, I'm not going to give a lot of examples there, but maybe just keep it more on what's personal to you and not just, you know, if that makes sense, like other just random things happening in the world.
Yes, very good. Jenika, I'm going to ask if you could maybe put your center's email address in the chat, because we have a lot of very Canadian specific questions. And while you're doing that, I was going to ask Yandhi if she could answer this question. Where can we select the type of deadline we are applying with? Regular decision, early decision, or early action? And what part of is that in the Common App, or where do I select that is the question?
Yeah, it's on the Common App. Let me go back to my presentation. Wait, yeah.
I believe it's when you first add your universities. They ask you, what is your proposed deadline?
We didn't take a screenshot of that, but it's in the My Colleges section, and it would be one of the specific questions that you're asked in that section.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's at the beginning.
Very good. Okay. So I think we're going to finish for the day because we've already hit our hour mark, and I want to thank you guys so much for all of your information. I would like to recommend or remind everyone that this has been recorded on Education USA Costa Rica's Facebook page, so you can watch it from the beginning to the end. And we have a lot of people asking how they can contact their advisor in their country. So I'm going to type the link here. That link should take you to a search bar where you can search by country and reach out to the nearest Education USA Center to you. And I think I typed it right. Let me check. We want to remind you all that on Wednesday, we're actually going to have a session about how to fill out the Common App for guidance counselors. So students are welcome to participate in this event on Wednesday because we know that many students have to help their guidance counselors fill this out. It is at 2 p.m. CST, 3 p.m. CDT, 4 p.m. EDT. And we hope that you participate. And without further ado, thank you so much, Jenika and Yandhi, for all of your help. We hope to see you in the future, and thanks to everyone for joining in today. Stay safe, wash your hands, and be on the lookout for more North America, Central America, and Caribbean regional webinars that are going to be coming in the next few months. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.